Today we're talking about the moment you redo someone else's work without ever deciding to. The instructions you gave clearly, the numbers that came back wrong, and your hands already moving to fix it before you've even registered what you're doing. Well, look at why that happens and why it's really actually about the person who got it wrong. We'll talk about where this pattern started long before anyone had a team to manage and what it was protecting you from back then. And then we'll get into what changes for you and for the people you lead when responsibility becomes something you choose rather than something your body does automatically. If you've ever caught yourself fuming quietly at your desk over something you could have just said out loud, this one's for you. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome to Project Joyful, the podcast for health-centered leaders. Project Joyful is a space for conversations at the intersection of leadership, health, and lived experience. Here we explore what it means to lead in ways that honour your body, protect long-term capacity, and support a life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. This episode is part of the Biology of Leadership series. In this series, we explore leadership through your body, not as a performance to optimize or a mindset to fix, but as a biological experience shaped over time. Leadership doesn't just live in decisions, strategies, or roles. It lives in your nervous system and how responsibility is held and how reliability and care quietly organize your body long before you're consciously aware of it. These conversations are for leaders who are capable, trusted, and effective, and who are curious about how leadership is experienced internally, not just how it performs externally. There's nothing you need to do as you listen, no insight you need to apply. This is simply an invitation to understand what's been shaping your experience of leadership beneath the surface, and what's become possible when biology becomes part of the conversation. Let's begin, shall we? So you said, put the actuals in this column, put the variance in that one, title it, reference those numbers back to the board pack that they came from. So anyone opening it in 6 months' time will know exactly where those numbers came from. You went through it with her, line by line. She nodded. She said she understood. And then it comes back. There are numbers in it you don't recognize. No note on where they came from. No reference back to the source. You sit with the file open trying to trace them back, and you just can't. Not without going back through 3 other documents and rebuilding that trail yourself. And that's when you feel it. It starts low, somewhere under your ribs. A tightening that wasn't there a second ago. It moves before you've named it. Up through your chest, into your shoulders, which are already higher than they were when you opened the file. Your jaw sets without you even deciding that's what it needs to do. There's a heat behind it. Something close to irritation, close to something else that you don't have time to name right now. You're still looking at the numbers, still trying to trace them, and some part of you has already stopped trying. As you reach for the keyboard, you notice you're holding your breath. You don't remember deciding this. There was a version of this moment where you could have said something, sent it back, sat with her, and gone through it again. That version didn't happen. This one did. You're rebuilding the trail yourself now, tracing each number back, one at a time, opening the other document to check it, then coming back one more time, filling in the reference that she was supposed to add, the one you can still hear yourself explaining to her 3 days ago. And somewhere in the middle of it, thought arrives. You don't invite it, it's just there, fully formed, sharper than you'd ever say out loud. Why can't she just do her job? It doesn't pass through and leave, it sits there while you work. And the longer you're in the spreadsheet, the louder that thought gets. Every number you retrace, every gap you fill in, just feeds it a little bit more. By the time you're onto the 3rd correction, you're not just fixing a document anymore. You are fuming. Quietly, at your desk, jaw tight, there's like this black cloud around your screen. You're telling yourself all the things that you'd never actually say to her directly. You did explain this properly. You know you did. You went through it line by line, and she nodded, and she said she understood. And none of that seems to matter now. So you keep going because it's faster this way. Next time, you'll just build the whole thing yourself before you hand it over. That way she can't get it wrong. And it isn't really about her. Not underneath, because this happens whenever you hand something off. You're a good manager. You set the milestones. You agreed on what done looks like. You built in the check-in point for Wednesday, specifically so you wouldn't have to hover to make sure it's right. And still, it's only Tuesday, and you find your attention drifting towards the shared document a full day early. Still, you catch yourself opening the client email thread you asked someone else to run just to see how the tone's landing. The PowerPoint, you said, run with it, gets opened by you at 9 that night. Not because anything's due, but not because the check-in isn't scheduled, but because you want to check it. Some part of you wanted to see it before Wednesday decided to show you. The structure was never the problem. You built a good structure. The problem is what's underneath that structure. The part of you that built the check-in point and still can't wait for it to arrive. Now, sometimes the work genuinely wasn't at standard. Sometimes those numbers are wrong, more than once, and no amount of reframing changes that. And sometimes what you meant and what you said weren't quite the same thing. The instruction was complete in your head, reference it back to the source. But what you actually said left room for more than one interpretation. And she took the version that made sense to her. The version in your head is always the fullest version. What comes out is often a summary of it. Either way, this is actually about what you did next. You didn't go back to her. You didn't say, this isn't what we agreed. Let's go through it again. You didn't say, I think I wasn't as clear as I meant to be. Can we redo this together? You went into the document and fixed it yourself. At your desk, jaw still tight, telling yourself it's quicker this way. Telling yourself, well, at least now it'll actually be right. So whatever the actual gap was, hers or yours, the redo actually wasn't a response to it. You fixed the document. You didn't fix the thing that caused the document to come back wrong, whether that was her understanding or your instruction or capability. They're still sitting there unaddressed, waiting to happen again the next time. And here's the part that doesn't stay contained to the document. You tell yourself you've dealt with it quietly on your own, so it's finished. But it isn't finished. The next time you talk to her, something of what you're carrying is still there. Even though you've said nothing, even though you believe that you've moved on, you actually don't have to say a word for her to feel it. Nervous systems pick up what doesn't get said long before they register what does get said. She feels the shift in your tone, the shorter answers, the way you're slightly less available than you were last week. And she can't name why, because nothing was ever said. So she adjusts. She gets a little more careful around you, a little less willing to ask the question she actually needs to ask. And the distance you thought you'd resolved by staying quiet, well, that just relocated somewhere else. Your nervous system isn't weighing fix it myself against talk to her. These aren't two equal options. One is fast, familiar, ends the moment you close the laptop. The other means sitting across from her, naming what didn't land and not knowing exactly how she'll take it. Your body reaches for the controllable discomfort over the unpredictable discomfort almost every time. Oh, and your body calls it diligence. The reader was never really about her work or even about your instructions. It was about which discomfort you were willing to tolerate. Somewhere back before any of this had anything to do with staff or spreadsheets or board packs, there's a little girl learning what keeps everyone around her safe and what keeps her safe too. Maybe it's a younger brother or sister she's watching while the adults are stretched thin. Maybe it's noticing when mum's had a hard day before anyone says so, or knowing which version of dad walked into the door tonight. Maybe it's being the one who walked grandma across the road to the dairy and back, keeping half an eye on the traffic, half an eye on her, making sure she got back safely without either of them having to say that that's what was happening. Maybe it's carrying granddad his cup of tea, held steady in both of those little hands, concentrating the whole way so it doesn't spill, and being rewarded with his smile when she gets there without a drop of precious tea lost. Nobody sits her down and teaches this. It's quieter than that. It's the moment she's praised for handling something an adult forgot. It's been called mature, sensible, such a good girl, so on top of things, while other children her age are still allowed to just be children. And what she learns is this: when she notices what's needed and quietly handles it, the big people around her are happy and she's safe. Happy big people means safe little people. That's the whole equation. Learned early, learned well, before she ever had the words for it. And it's a very clever adaptation. It's designed to keep her safe in the exact environment that she was in. And when she grows up and she finds a career that rewards the exact same thing, the noticing before anyone else notices, the anticipating, the handling of things before they become anyone's problem, she gets promoted for it. She gets called reliable, then indispensable, then the one who just gets it done. Nobody in that boardroom knows that they're rewarding the same little girl who once carried a cup of tea without spilling a drop, but they are. The equation never actually changed, only the size of the cup. The problem is what doesn't get built alongside it, and what it starts to cost her once she's carrying this much for so long. Because the nervous system that's constantly noticing, constantly anticipating, constantly scanning for the gap before it becomes a problem, well, it doesn't get to switch off just because the room is safe now. It stays on. It's the version of her that can't fully rest on a Sunday, that wakes up at 3 a.m. running through tomorrow, that sits in her own body like low-grade static, even when nothing's actually wrong in that moment. Hypervigilance doesn't announce itself as a problem. It looks from the outside and often from the inside too, like excellence, like care, like being the reliable one. It's only over years that it shows up as exhaustion that rest doesn't touch, or a body that's tired in a way sleep doesn't fix, or a quiet fraying in the relationships with the very people she's been so busy keeping safe. Because nobody was teaching her at the same time how to have the other kind of conversation, the one where something isn't right. And instead of quietly fixing it herself, she says so directly to the person who did it, and she stays in the discomfort of their reaction long enough to see it through. That's a different skill. It doesn't get rewarded the same way in a household where the safest thing a child can do is not create any more for the adults to manage. Here in New Zealand, we sometimes talk about having conversations in a mana-enhancing way. So mana is a Māori concept. It means prestige or standing, a kind of spiritual and social authority that a person carries. A mana-enhancing conversation addresses what's true without diminishing the other person in the process. So it's precision through the lens of I see you. It's not softness instead of honesty, but honesty that still holds the other person's dignity while it's been spoken. And it's exactly the skill that never gets built when the only strategy on offer from very early on is to quietly absorb the gap so nobody's standing or anyone's peace is put at risk. So she becomes excellent at absorbing. She becomes excellent at noticing, at anticipating, at handling things before they become anyone's problem. And decades later, in a leadership role that requires both absorbing and addressing, only one of them ever got any practice. And the body doing all of the absorbing has been running that way for a very long time. So this isn't just about the redo or about having one hard conversation that she's avoiding. It's the whole pattern, the checking in that she resists, the anxiety of letting something sit in someone else's hands, the fixing that happens instead of the naming. All of it's the same adaptation, still running, still trying to keep everyone around her safe and happy, the way that it always did, at a cost that was never visible while it was working. Recalibration here isn't about caring less or lowering her standards or deciding the work doesn't matter as much as she thinks it does. It's about building the muscle that never got built, learning to address what's true in a way that still sees the other person instead of quietly absorbing what isn't. Absorbing it made sense once. It kept her safe and it kept everyone around her happy. And it worked. But her body's been carrying that old strategy for a very long time now, well past the point where it's still needed. And there's another option available to her that she's never actually tried. So picture the version of this where it goes differently. The work comes back, It's not quite what you asked or not quite what you meant. And for a second, your hands still move towards the keyboard the way they always have. But this time, you stop. You go back to her instead. Here's what I was expecting. Here's what came through instead. Let's have a look at it together. It's not comfortable. It doesn't need to be comfortable to be right. And something happens on her side of that conversation that never gets a chance to happen when you quietly take it back and fix it yourself. She learns what actually went wrong. She gets to try again with a clearer picture this time. Instead of watching the task disappear into your evening and reappear the next morning already finished, she gets trusted with the next thing and the one after that because you didn't quietly signal without ever meaning to that this wasn't really hers to get right. And over time, this is how a team builds real capability instead of a team that's very good at being managed around. And something happens on your side too. The redo stops being the only outlet for what you're carrying. The checking in you resist, the anxiety and the gap between handing something off and hearing how it's going, some of that starts to ease. Not because the standard stopped mattering to you, because caring about the standard and needing to control the outcome was never actually the same thing, even though it's felt that way. And this is quieter work than it sounds, right? It's 100 small moments like the one at your desk with the spreadsheet. Each one a chance to do the older, more familiar thing or the newer, less certain one. The more you do the newer, less certain one, the more comfortable it becomes. Hyper-responsibility was never only about what you do with other people's work. It's the same pattern turned inward onto yourself. The redo says, I can't trust this unless I've held it myself. Over-preparing says the same thing. It's just aimed at you instead of her. If I know every angle, if I rehearsed every version of this, then nothing can catch me out and nothing can go wrong. It's the same nervous system running the same strategy, just wearing a different outfit depending on whether the thing at risk is someone else's work or your own performance in that room. Which is why you can walk into a meeting knowing your material better than anyone there, having prepared for questions nobody ends up asking, and still find yourself rehearsing the opening one more time in that corridor beforehand, still reading every face for a reaction partway through, still leaving wondering whether you actually showed up as yourself or as the version of you that had already prepared for something to go wrong. That's what I'm unpacking in an upcoming free event, when preparation isn't the problem. Why you still second guess yourself when you're the most prepared person in that room. If you've ever walked into an important meeting knowing your material inside out, yet still found yourself rehearsing your opening, reading the room, or leaving wondering whether you showed up at your best, then this briefing will explain why. Details are coming soon. And if any of this is sitting with you before that moment, then you're welcome to send me a message. If you're on LinkedIn, just search for Tracy Tutty or find me on Instagram at Tracy C. Tutty. They're both linked in the show notes too. For now, I'm sending you lots of love. Hey, thanks for listening to today's podcast. Can I ask you a favour? If our conversation spoke to you today, could you please take a moment to leave a 5-star review? Your review will help people discover this podcast, and together we can create a world where there's even more love and more laughter. And if you want to hear more from the Project Joyful podcast, just click the subscribe button. Bye for now.